Welcome once again to Lehto's Law. Here's Steve Lehto.
We've got some closure on that wacky case out of Minnesota where somebody tried to bribe a juror. And Kevin and Dave both sent this to me. Thank you very much. From The Guardian, 5 convicted in U.S. COVID fraud case involving failed juror bribe. As many people pointed out, well, they may have failed to bribe one, but they might have bribed others. Because would you really only bribe one? Because one vote would not necessarily do a whole lot for you, except possibly get you a mistrial, which means you go through it a second time. So the jury also acquitted 2 others for roles in the scheme to steal over $40 million that was supposed to feed children during the pandemic. And now people are going to go, wait. 2 people were acquitted? Yes. The jury convicted 5 residents of Minnesota, but acquitted 2 others yesterday for their roles in a scheme to steal more than $40 million that was supposed to feed children during the coronavirus pandemic. Case recently received widespread attention after someone apparently tried to bribe a juror with a bag of $120,000 in cash. It's a big old bag of cash. The juror was dismissed before deliberations began, so that juror was just out. And a second juror who was told about the bribe attempt was also dismissed. An FBI investigation of the attempted bribe continues with no arrests yet made or announced. The 7 defendants are the first of 70 to stand trial, what federal prosecutors have called one of the nation's largest pandemic-related frauds, exploiting rules that were kept lax so the economy wouldn't crash. And there was a whole thing about we've got to get the money out. And, of course, we heard about fraud, not from day 1, but maybe day 2. More than $250 million in federal funds was taken in the scheme in Minnesota, with only about $50 million of it recovered. And people are saying, but Steve, fraud did occur on day 1. Yeah, we didn't hear about it till day 2. The defendants faced a mix of counts, including conspiracy, wire fraud, money laundering, and federal programs bribery. It ended with a split verdict. But remember, that bribery right there is not of the jury, it's of feds, allegedly. So there's a whole bunch of people here found guilty on most of the counts against them, and 2 of them were acquitted on all counts. 18 other defendants have already pleaded guilty. Defense attorneys argued that the defendants provided real meals to real people. After both sides learned about the bribe attempt, the judge ordered all 7 defendants to surrender their cell phones so that investigators could look for evidence. She also ordered all 7 taken into custody and sequestered the jury. So, interestingly enough, that's the equivalent of the jury being taken into custody. Because when you are sequestered, you go from the courthouse to a hotel, and from the hotel to the courthouse, and they keep a very, very close eye on you. It would not be fun to be sequestered. Now, I know there have been a couple jokes in the media where people get sequestered on purpose because they want the free meals and the room service. But those are comedies, my friends. According to an FBI agent's affidavit, a woman rang the doorbell at the home of juror number 52 in the Minneapolis suburb of Spring Lake Park the night before the case went to the jury. The juror wasn't home, but a relative answered the door. The woman handed the relative a gift bag with a curly ribbon and images of flowers and butterflies and said it was a present for the juror. The woman told the relative to tell juror number 52 to say not guilty tomorrow, and there'd be more of that present tomorrow. After the woman left, the relative looked in the gift bag and saw it contained a substantial amount of cash, or as we like to say, a bag of cash. Now, here's the thing. As several people asked me, they said, Steve, they didn't deliver the money to her, they delivered it to her father or a relative. Well, but that relative was at her home. And so they didn't figure out relatives and they literally found out where she lived. You might say, but Steve, juror number 52, how many jurors are there? Well, I believe they said there was, 18, so 12 plus 6 alternates. Juror number 52 goes off the badge number they had before they were selected. So they bring in 100 potential jurors, numbered 1 through 100, and picked from them. And number 52 made the cut. The juror called police right after she got home and gave them the bag, which held stacks of hundreds, 50s, and 20s, totaling about $120,000. The woman who left the bag knew the juror's first name, the agent said. Names of the jurors have not been made public, but the list of people with access to it include prosecutors, defense lawyers, and the defendants. So if you've never selected a jury before, I can tell you that you will get a bunch of information about the jurors. If they fill out a questionnaire, you'll get the questionnaires also. So the attorneys know the names of the jurors and what they do for a living and so on. And quite often they know that without asking any questions because it's in the questionnaire. But of course, I didn't get that because I'm the attorney. I got that because I'm representing somebody who has the right to know these things. So the defendants have access to this stuff as well. But of course, that doesn't mean they have the right to, offer them cash for a good vote. It is highly likely that someone with access to the juror's personal information was conspiring with, at a minimum, the woman who delivered the bribe. Oh, you think? The FBI agent wrote that, noting that the alleged fraud conspiracy at the heart of the trial involved electronic communications, including text messages and emails. The question is, if you'd been busted for those text messages and emails, would you really still be doing that kind of a thing during your trial? And the answer, of course, to that is probably yes, because some people just never learn. So federal charges of bribery of a juror and influencing a juror carry a maximum potential penalty of 15 years in prison. 15 years in prison. So if they find out who did it, and they charge them, and they convict them, they can get 15 years in prison. So it's a fascinating case, but the weird part about it is, and I hate to say this, but now in the back of my mind, I'm thinking to myself, well, there were a couple acquittals there. How clean was this? And I'd like to think that they tried to bribe one juror. They didn't think it through very well. But I had so many people respond to the last video I did on this, and they said, well, all we know is that one juror reported it. What if others were bribed? And so it's crazy, but I'll tell you right now, this is highly unusual. I can't remember another case from real life. I've seen it in the movies, but another case in real life where somebody attempted to bribe a juror in an ongoing trial. I've never heard of that. So don't get me wrong, it doesn't surprise me. I mean, crazy stuff happens all the time. That's how I have a show. I talk about stuff. The steady supply of craziness from the world in which we live. But there were 5 convictions and 2 acquittals. And they got a whole bunch of more people to go through and put on trial. And they've already had something like 18 people who simply pleaded guilty. So it's sad because you'll recall that the pandemic, which is now a few years ago, back then, there were stories in the news almost daily about people getting busted for fraud because people would file the paperwork and say, oh, I've got a company with 3,000 employees and a massive payroll, and I'd like to keep all these people on the payroll. So lend me the money to keep these people on the payroll, and those loans are going to get forgiven. And so the person gets the money and goes buys a bunch of Lamborghinis and a house. And somebody comes back later and says, what? That guy didn't have a company. He was unemployed. In fact, what? And I remember at the time, I was very critical of how fast they were shoveling the money out the window to try to, kickstart the economy and so on. And I said it couldn't be that hard to double check some of this stuff because when someone says, I've got a business with thousands of employees, well, the government would have a record of that. It might be a different department of the government, but have you been paying, payroll taxes for all of these people? So all they had to do was double check 1 or 2 things and they could have stopped a huge chunk of this. Now, what happened in this case was this was money that people got who said, we're going to distribute meals to disadvantaged children, I believe, in Minnesota. So this wasn't quite the same as I simply want money to keep my business afloat. This is money for a program to distribute meals. But the amount of money involved is huge and crazy. The $250 million of federal money that went into this program, the feds have only recovered 50 of it. Other 200 is apparently gone. Now, some people who are skeptics might say, but Steve, maybe they actually used the $200 million to distribute meals to children. Well, that could be the case, except the jury didn't buy it. And I didn't watch the trial. So on cases like this, I have to defer to the jury because the jury is the one they're the ones who heard the testimony, watched the witnesses, heard the arguments, saw the evidence, and they came away from this unanimous that 5 of these people were guilty, and 2 of them they couldn't say that about. So I will defer to them on this, but of course, it's always going to be a question mark because we know that somebody out there is handing out bags of cash, or at least a bag of cash. And that would be kind of a very, very difficult thing. And by the way, you'll notice that in the story now, it says it was totaling about $120,000. And it was hundreds, 50s, and 20s. And I'm wondering now, what was the exact amount? Because I even thought the 120 was odd. Wouldn't you just make it 100? And so I had several people also say, well, no, Steve, obviously, it was originally 200. And somebody misplaced 80 of it. We don't know. But 5 people here were convicted. So the Guardian reported that Kevin and Dave both sent it. Thanks a lot. Questions or comments, put them below. Let's talk to you later. Bye-bye.
Thank you for watching Lehto's Law. If I had to live my life again, I'd make the same mistakes, only sooner.